Hello, good morning. My name is Sabrina Fendrick. I work for National NORML. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships. I also helped to found Virginia NORML a couple of years ago. And I recently moved out to Denver to open our new Denver satellite office for the national office. So I've been there for about 7 months, and we're there to sort of learn about what's going on in the cannabis industry, have our finger on the pulse of the retail market, how that's unfolding, all of the different and new issues that we're dealing with out there, how NORML and consumer advocacy fits into that, and just some of the new regulations that are building out of it. I think that this is really important for Virginia NORML to learn, because when you're talking about this with legislators about a retail or medical market, you can have an idea of what's going on in Colorado and actually help them visualize what that's going to look like. So without further ado, I'm just going to go and explain the basic overview of what I've learned so far of how the Colorado retail market is established, what some of the rules and regulations are, what some of the issues that they're dealing with, how that's working out, and we'll go from there. So, first slide, Ed. So just a little history. In 2012, Colorado voted to pass Amendment 64 with 54%. They had passed medical marijuana, I believe, in 2001. And the guidelines for Amendment 64, which created a retail market for adults 21 and over, was created by the Marijuana Enforcement Division. The Marijuana Enforcement Division, also known as the MED or the MED, was created in 2010 after the Holder memo came out saying that they would leave the states alone that followed, or the businesses that follow their state regulations. And that was created in 2010 for the medical marijuana, and they essentially folded a lot of the rules and regulations from that medical guidelines into the retail market. In January 1, 2014, they opened their first retail stores. And the MED is governed by the Department of Revenue. So, there are a ton of guidelines. This is just a basic overview that basically, okay, so there's the MIP, which is known as marijuana-infused products. That includes edibles, concentrates, things like that. Anytime that the plant is transferred to another facility to create another product. You have your retailers, the stores that actually sell to the public. You have your cultivators, which are the plants that are growing. You have your testing facilities. Every single one of these have to be licensed by the state and by the county or city that they exist in. Not every single county or city allows for retail marijuana markets. Some of them, it's up to the locality, the municipality, to decide whether or not they want to do that. There are more moratoriums in a lot of places. Some of them are starting to open up. A lot of them are considering it. There's new votes going on, so that is all changing. Then there is tracking. What Colorado does is a seed to sale program. So every single plant that is planted by a licensed cultivation center has a tracking number and a barcode. And that tracking number and barcode is followed from the time the seed is planted to the time that plant or however that plant goes into a product is sold to a member of the public. There are different tracking systems that they use. In Colorado, there are programs, software called MJ Freeway and BioTrack. I think there might be a few more. What's it? Agrisoft. I guess that's really the lesser ones.
Yeah, there's really three main players in the software department.
Yeah, and so the thing about those that's where the retailer side tracks what's going on, what they're selling, who they're selling to, and that applies to both retail and medical. And also there are a few differences between retail and medical, but they're based off of the same general model. And on the government end, on the MED end, they get all that information through a program called Metric, which is also known as MITS, Marijuana Inventory Tracking System, and that just tracks where the barcode and the plant goes. So as far as I know, they are still working on combining the software from the retail side with Metric and the MITS. It exists, but I think they're kind of working out some of the details on that. Okay, next slide. So there are additional guidelines, which is quality control. They have testing. There are a couple of licensed testing facilities. But the testing facilities can only test products that are created by licensed cultivators or licensed MIPs, marijuana inventory or infused products. So if you are a medical marijuana patient that's growing your own plant, you don't have to have a permit, because in Colorado you're allowed to grow up to 6 plants under Amendment 64, and if you're a medical patient, you get a certain number of plants depending on what your doctor thinks you need. You would not be able to go get that tested by a licensed facility. So then there is standardization. Oh, and for testing, they test for a couple of things and the regulations for that is changing, but potency is obviously one of the big ones. Residual solvents, poisons, toxins, harmful chemicals, dangerous molds or mildew, harmful microbials such as E. coli, and salmonella and pesticides. The thing about that is, however, that pesticides there's hundreds of different kinds, there's hundreds of different kinds of molds, and the technology for the testing is still under development to read all of the different kinds, because right now they only read for a certain amount or certain types of molds and pesticides. Then you have the standardization. So potency. When I first arrived in Denver, this rule did not exist. Anyone from anywhere out of state could go in and buy an edible that contained an unlimited, essentially, amount of edible.
180 milligrams.
180 milligrams, which is, for somebody that hasn't eaten marijuana, which consuming it, eating it, has a very different effect than smoking it, and it takes longer. We'll get into that in a minute, but there were a couple of famous issues. I'm sure everybody knows about the Maureen Dowd situation, which sort of spurred a lot of the new regulations that came out. To me, I was amazed that they were allowing this to happen, that they were actually selling these little tiny chocolate balls that contained 100 milligrams of THC in them, and explaining that there were 8 different servings of this little tiny chocolate ball. I mean, who does that? Nobody eats servings like that. People are used to eating a whole package of something that you get. So they capped it at 10 milligrams for retail. The regulations for medical are different. They don't really have that yet, although I think that's sort of under discussion. But for retail, they capped it at 10 milligrams a piece, or if you're talking about like a chocolate bar, a Hershey type bar, that it has to be breakable into 10 milligram pieces. So there's also production. There was an incident with an edible company that, while it seems like anybody can basically get a license, not anybody, but this guy got a license. He was an edible company, but he was extracting the THC in a dirty washing machine. And they were selling it. So the Department of Health, I think, went in and they found that, and it was like this old rusty washing machine. I was amazed that this guy had a license. What is the qualifications for that? But so he basically got shut down, and I don't know the full story, but it was a little disconcerting that was something, so they're moving into more of a industrial standards, and Jan could speak more to that because that's more his expertise. Packaging, there's rules about things having to be childproof. And then also something that's called an exit bag. Every single time somebody purchases marijuana, it has to be placed in an exit bag, an opaque, not see-through, and not open, childproof. which is interesting. And in some stores, one of the ones, there happens to be one in my office building. You have to pay an extra $1 for them, but you can bring them back and reuse them. And they've changed the rules on that as well. So there's going to be new ones coming out. I know that the companies are getting really frustrated because they put in these new rules. These companies pay a lot of money to get old ones printed, and then they have to change them. And so there's some issues with that. And then labeling. Labeling kind of goes to the edible issue again. How are we going to inform the consumer of what's in the package, what's important to know? There's ingredients. You want to know, warnings and symbols, potency. Not a lot of people understand even what 100 milligrams of THC means. What is that? So, looking up a different sort of scalable code, color code, or symbols that says sort of like alcohol proofing and 10% proof, 30% proof, 40% proof. So they're coming up with different things for that. They do include warnings such as this has not been tested by the FDA. They include the ingredients. Obviously, they have to include the different THC, amount of CBD, amount of THC. I'll speak more to that. Next slide. Taxes. So this is a very basic overview. If you want to know anything more about taxes, you could ask Jan or a marijuana business attorney. But the taxes has been a huge issue, blessing, curse, depends who you ask. So for retail, there is several different kinds of taxes. There's the state special marijuana tax, which is 10%. There's the state sales tax, which applies to medical and retail, but the other taxes only apply to retail. And then you have the marijuana excise tax, which is the first transfer or sale from the cultivator to the retail marijuana store. They have that with alcohol and tobacco, and then different sales, local sales tax. Yeah, that applies to the different places. So that marks the price up a lot. In some places, an eighth can cost upwards of $70. But it only, some studies say it only costs a fraction of that to create. But when you're adding, all of the businesses and the people that are working on it, and then the taxes on top of that, and the taxes for each step, it comes to a lot. However, that has been very useful for Colorado's industry. Next slide. So here's just an overview of the total amount of purchases of cannabis in Colorado. So in June, we had $28.6 million in medical marijuana purchases and $24.7 million in retail. And then July was the first month that retail purchases actually surpassed medical marijuana purchases. And pretty much with the exception, I think, 1 or 2 months, every single month has broken the previous month's record in terms of retail marijuana sales. And then in August, we have 34 million retail, 33.4 million medical. So that seems to be a trend that is going up. Next slide. So this is tax revenue.
That's great.
This shows the sales on the left and sort of how it's climbing, how medical and retail are meeting, and retail is now surpassing medical in terms of sales. And so with all of those taxes that I mentioned, since January 1, these numbers are going to change. They're going to come out with the next month's numbers any minute. $45.2 million have been brought in taxes, licenses, fees for recreational medical marijuana. And the licenses and fees are substantial, and Jan will speak to that, but that is a major contributor to what the overall income. And that also goes to, Amendment 64 says that a certain amount, and there was another vote after that where the state got to decide if a portion of the excise tax could go to building schools. And that passed. So the first $40 million that is brought in through the marijuana excise tax, not through the total amount, but just one form of the taxes goes to building schools. And they've brought in a couple $1 million for that already. And some of it has already been applied. Next slide. So, current issues, edibles. Labeling, as I mentioned before, potency restrictions and consumer education, I think, is the next step on how to deal with this edibles problem. Grandma from Indiana who hasn't smoked for 30 years doesn't really understand, she had a brownie 30 years ago, maybe recently that she made at home, but doesn't know, industry style, high potency edible will affect you differently. So how do we educate the public about these edibles? People want to try them, not everybody likes to smoke. So there is a campaign that's going on in Colorado called Start Low, Go Slow. And it's basically to educate consumers that are not quite as familiar with the effects of edibles and certain steps that you can take to make the experience enjoyable, other ways that you can manage any negative effects that come from over-ingestion. So as they suggest, start with one serving, 10 milligram piece is what they suggest. They tell all of the bud tenders need to tell their customers that. Some people say 10 milligrams is too much, but I think that it's good that it is capped at that, and you have to wait 1 to 2 hours. I mean, what happened with Maureen Dowd, she took some, didn't feel anything, probably after 15 minutes and took more. It's just like prescription medications, you have to take it and you have to wait. Don't mix. Alcohol can have a serious effect on your high. And most of the time, or sometimes not always terribly pleasant. Obviously, keep out of reach of children, keep it away from pets. Babies and pets seems to be another bit of a concern, but that's an easily solvable problem when you put it away and are aware of who can have access to it and where it is. There's a company that I think is a really good example. I don't have a high vector image of their label, which I wish I did, but they're called Julie's Baked Goods. And this company has an amazing label that they have had prior to any labeling regulations that have come out that basically says it prepares you for the edible experience. So it tells you how much to take, how long to wait, when first euphoric peak, 2 to 3 hours, second euphoric peak, 4 to 5 hours, duration, 8 to 10 hours, effects can last as long. Fatty foods intensify psychoactive effects. If you over-ingest, drink tea, sit in a dark corner, relax. It just really, the first time I saw it, because I wasn't really familiar with edibles, it made me a lot more comfortable with going forward with that and preparing me for the experience. ConsumeResponsibly.org, that's a new MPP campaign that just came out. They have billboards up to just sort of continue to enforce that Start Low, Go Slow campaign. Next slide. Okay, another current issue. Here's a general overview of banking, federal taxes. So, a couple of months ago, maybe a year, the DOJ and Department of Treasury came out with some new guidelines about banking and how these new legal retail shops could work with the banks. Banks are required to file suspicious activity reports. They laid out certain rules. They have to comply with the different pillars that were laid out in previous memos. No interstate trafficking, keep it away from kids, follow the rules. It's a list of different regulations, and that they can reflect the state's marijuana legal status. However, because the bank's entire existence are framed by regulations, they've been very hesitant to work with the marijuana businesses. They say, just because it's a memo from the Department of Treasury and holder does not hold up in a court of law. What it says in the court of law is that marijuana is a Schedule I drug, and you are not allowed to work with a company that is involved with a Schedule I drug. There are some banks that are doing it. However, it's on the DL. These companies are, using, well, I don't know exactly, but some are, some aren't. It's a major problem. It's very disconcerting. A lot of them are working with cash. They bring in tens of thousands of dollars a day, and it's a very serious issue, both with security and, even just financial issues. So there was a law that passed recently that Hickenlooper signed into law, which is what Colorado, they could create a credit union, sort of a co-op law, so a marijuana industry credit union. I thought that was a great idea. However, it needs approval from the U.S. Federal Reserve, and it has not gotten that. So that's just sitting there. And then another issue is 1080E, which is basically the federal employees withholding taxes, and businesses have to pay with that electronically, and if you don't have a bank, you can't pay for it electronically, and if you don't, you get a 10% fine every single time. So there's a lawyer who's head of Colorado NORML. She's a marijuana business lawyer. She can answer these questions in a lot more detail. She's actually suing the IRS because if they're not going to change the regulations to allow the banks to work with them, because banks don't operate off of good faith statements, then they should not be subject to this 10% penalty. So that is in the works, and that's an issue that they're dealing with. Okay, next slide.
Other quick highlights. I have to move you on.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
All right, we'll go quick.
I wasn't sure you were able to see me.
No, I wasn't. Yeah. Okay, I'll go quick. Okay.
She's far more prepared than I am, so I'd let her finish.
Okay, that's totally. I just didn't want to cut into your time and make you mad. So, all right.
I'll answer questions. Just get the presentation.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Sabrina. I'm sorry.
Okay. And this will be really quick. So impairment testing, this is another thing that really NORML and consumer advocacy is still involved with in the legal market. So employers can still fire their employees if they test positive for THC, even though it's legal in that state. 64 was actually a constitutional amendment. This is something that has gone to court. There's an issue that Coates v. Dish Network. That's actually about the medical marijuana law, which is also a constitutional amendment. But if this case turns out in the favor of Coates, then it could easily be argued that that should apply to retail law. But this is the first case that's made it all the way up to the Colorado Supreme Court. They had hearings very, very recently. They haven't ruled yet, but basically he was a quadriplegic, fired for using state-sanctioned medical marijuana. And so we'll find out how that turns out. Another issue, 2 more slides. So teen education. How do we talk to kids about pot? Hickenlooper and the MED thought that it would be a great idea to come up with this sort of Reefer Madness-esque campaign that they literally put out, as you can see, life-size rat cages and essentially compared teenagers to rats in a cage and said, you don't want to be an experiment, we don't know the effects of marijuana, but in a very sort of condescending way, which I don't believe speaks to teenagers and how they actually hear lessons and listen to it. I think that there are better ways to tell teenagers how to use caution, how to wait, just like we talk to them about alcohol. It's for adults, but we don't say crazy things like that. And they gave the opportunity for different jurisdictions to pick up this campaign. Boulder decided that this was not the best way to educate their teenagers, and they said thanks, but no thanks. Okay, last slide. All of these issues are changing constantly. Every 3 months or so, there's new regulations are going to come out very shortly with labeling, and there was some controversy where there was a recommendation about banning all edibles except for lozenges, and everybody freaked out, but it was just a recommendation, and that's not going to happen because the whole reason marijuana was legalized is because we understand that prohibition doesn't work. Banning things doesn't work. You have to regulate it, and you have to educate people. So the tracking system is changing, the distribution is changing. They moved from a, well, you can explain it, from vertical integration to open market, which will be explained by Jan. And packaging, childproof packaging, opaqueness, things like that. So there is your basic overview of Colorado's new retail market.
Excellent. Let's give her a round of applause.
So my name is Jan Carlos Bile. I'm one of the founder and owner of MedCanna Consulting. MedCanna is, I was going to kind of give a little bit of a personal, first of all, thank you NORML, Virginia and National NORML for putting on the conference, and for all of you guys for being on the forefront of a difficult state. As a Virginian, I'm actually originally from Northern Virginia. I can empathize. I actually left Virginia in the United States, frankly, for many years due to the laws we have in place. And so I'll give you a little bit of a background just on myself and on what we do quickly, and then frankly, Sabrina's far more prepared presentation-wise. I hope to add a robustness and a wealth of knowledge to the discussion. You know, I grew up in Northern Virginia during the height of the Reagan era. Just say no. I was an athlete. You know, didn't look at anything but alcohol until I was 17. And as a football player, I started to find relief and ability to sort of heal and perform the next day that you don't find with alcohol or other substances. I ended up in university in Canada, began working with the plant from a cultivation standpoint very early on. Worked with groups that were growing hemp as well. Ended up moving to Amsterdam. Lived in Amsterdam for nearly a decade. Helped to build the Greenhouse Seed Company with Ariane Roskam and others. My other partners in MedCanna are Adam Dunn from TH Seeds and Short Brooks from the Flying Dutchman. So we are sort of three of I see some heads nodding. So those of my age and over are familiar, I think, with these names. The other of you, go pick up some old high times. And so after spending quite a long time overseas, thankfully, finally, our regimes shifted, or the consciousness shifted, and things started to go our way. So we returned to the country and started to put our skills to use. I built the first two Washington, D.C. medical marijuana cultivation facilities. We opened and operated facilities in Arizona. We operate all cultivation for Dixie Elixirs out of Colorado, which is one of the larger edible manufacturers in the country. We currently work to gain licensure in basically all new territories. So we have applications or work with groups that are applying in pretty much every state that's attempting to legalize either medical or recreational. You know, it's obviously in a country where somebody dies every 19 seconds, I think it is, or 19 minutes, I believe, from prescription medications. You know, this is it's a personal liberty. It's a humanitarian effort that we're all engaged in. So that's a little bit sort of about what we do. In terms of what's important for going forward in identifying hurdles, obstacles, pitfalls of preparing for a cannabis economy. Really, I think I'll give some generalized background, but again, as we work in pretty much across the board, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with state-by-state regulations and diversity of those regulations, because they are, there are obviously some similar threads and tone, but they can vary wildly state to state. One of the things that we are seeing as we look at at least especially the medical side of it, is that we are getting more, regulated, let's call it. Restrictive is maybe a little too harsh, but it is a little bit more restrictive, a little bit more regulated each time we go into a new state. And that's a lot of it has to do with the east of the Mississippi sort of thing. And we found this with most recently in Massachusetts. It was a very difficult process through the Massachusetts application process. We've now got Massachusetts and Connecticut, Connecticut was ridiculously restricted. You had to have, I believe it was $2 million in the bank. You know, each of these states are like 50,000 minimum application fee, which varies wildly from Colorado, where when Colorado first, you know, so obviously, bear with me, take a step back, California first, right? That beautiful mess. Colorado came in, attempted to set an actual framework, but again, very, very open. When you went to first get a retail license or a cultivation license in Colorado, I mean, it was, you know, a signature and a few $100. Now, any of these new states where you're attempting to get licensure, you are looking at reams of paper. Reams of paper. $50,000 minimum to $150,000 application fees, non-refundable. I think the lowest standard to date is about $500,000 in the bank with showing capital. I mean, if you want to actually get that license, showing operating capital for a couple of years, so you're talking $2.5 to $5 million. We work with groups that are putting $50 million down on paper. You know, it is becoming. Look, the industry is upon us, and it is coming in a very, mature business fashion. And so, especially a state like Virginia, as it's going to take some time, by the time we do get there here, that's what's going to be the system, you know. They won't be, you know, little mom and pops like we had in Colorado that will have to fight and struggle their way through it. If you don't come out in the beginning with the button-down lawyer and the big fat checkbook, you can pretty much forget. You know, I mean, that's unfortunately just sort of how it's gone. But it doesn't mean that it excludes individuals that are in this room at all, or others. It just means that you have to be aware of and prepare and pool resources and come together from an early stage in order to you know, have that opportunity. You know, there's a lot of issues that Sabrina touched on that I'd be happy to answer all kinds of questions regarding. You know, as I said, one of the big ones, banking, that you mentioned is a huge issue. It's one that I've had to deal with personally recently. You know, we have multiple entity names, just because you're not sure which bank is going to work with you that week. So 280E, of course, as well. So NORML does a lot of work. NCIA, National Cannabis Industry Association, as well, of course, has lobbyists on the Hill working, you know, towards these issues. 280E, which wasn't mentioned, which is the you know, you call it the Scarface law, essentially, which was the IRS's attempt to block large-scale narcotics smugglers from deducting business expenses, you know, cigarette boat deductions, etc. You know, obviously there was reason for it in certain realms, but it's antiquated, it's punitive, and it really makes this high-dollar gamble even more risky. You know, you know, people sometimes seem to think, okay, this guy's coming in with 50 million, but even when you're producing $20 million a year, as some of these companies are, you are 60% of that, which would normally be written off, is not. All right? So it's a very, very difficult economy. You know, a lot of people are rushing to this industry, and that's wonderful. But it's always, yeah, I think the Navy SEALs have an expression: you never run to your death. You know, you want to be aware of the environment, of the political and business environment. Prepare yourselves. Be aware of what's really going on, how to survive it, how to make it last, so that hopefully the work that's being done by groups like NORML and NCIA have time to come to fruition, and you know, you weather the storm long enough that the I don't know the right meteorological term, but the valleys are longer and the peaks are less high. You know, I think best thing is really to answer questions as opposed to attempt to disseminate currently 23 states worth of different legislation.
Go ahead. All right, big round of applause. Okay.